Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on the importance of standardizing collaboration technology. It looks like we're a little after the hour now, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. For today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the fact that several organizations are currently having the conversation around the need for standards. But with that process not being clearly defined, it's not always easy to get there. So for this month, we have joined forces with QSC to highlight the best practices when creating these global technology standards for your enterprise. We'll be discussing how to create the processes based on the size of your organization so you can walk away with that knowledge on how to implement it to fit your needs. From QSC, we have Corey Schaefer joining us. Corey Schaefer is the Director of Strategic Industry Relations at QSC, and she's based out in Costa Mesa, California. In her role, she's focused on applying her vision and thought leadership to the development and execution of end-user strategies and forging relationships with industry influencers. She's also a key contributor to QSC's marketing initiatives and ensures QSC's continued success in the IT and AV space. So, without further ado, I will hand it over to Corey. Corey, it's all yours.
Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar, and a special thanks to Rahi for hosting this webinar and for allowing me to speak to best practices when creating global technology standards. When I'm going to refer to technology throughout this webinar, the technology I'll be referring to is really technology that's used in the meeting room space. A meeting room could be a classroom at a university, an auditorium, a huddle room, large conference room, multi-purpose room, or an all-hands space. So this webinar is going to be talking about specific technology standards in meeting rooms. I'm with QSC, and QSC is a technology manufacturer based in Costa Mesa, California, with offices around the globe. We manufacture technology for audio, video, and control. I joined QSC about 3.5 years ago, and my first year and a half I spent on the road, in the field, in the trenches, talking to universities and large global enterprise customers and looking at the technology they were using in their meeting rooms, in their classrooms, and picking their brains and understanding their challenges and the why they were having challenges, and then looking to pull the commonalities of companies that seem to have it mastered and were doing it well. So today I want to share what I learned from that, or as I like to call it, best practices when creating standards. I pulled a couple of quotes from some of those clients that I met with my first year and a half. So why did they create standards? Some companies recognized how important standards were. We're moving to a new building and we need to standardize. We're growing so quickly that we won't be able to support the organization unless we create technology standards. So moving into a new building, they understood it. Imagine moving into new geographical regions, deploying new campuses, etc. The need for standards is obvious. Another critical reason to create standards and why organizations do it. For their users, those actually using the rooms, they want to make sure that they're not thinking about technology. They just walk in and it works. They know how to get the room to meet their needs. When they need to share content, they know exactly what to do. So no one is hand-holding each and every meeting. No one is hand-holding a professor getting a class started. It's just intuitive, and the technology is not even considered. The rooms just function as needed. So I just extracted some commonalities, some elements that companies that really are deploying technology fast and doing it well and supporting it well over the long haul. So what traits do they have? Well, they have a presence of strong global AV leadership with strong executive support. They have budget, and they have aligned resources globally. Now, I did pull AV and put it in here. We're seeing those responsible for the technology in the meeting rooms used to be called the audiovisual team, AV, but now these teams are part of the IT department. So these are all one team now. Another common trait is those that have active involvement and in-house capabilities for when designing the systems that are deployed in these rooms, with a clear understanding of how users are using the rooms and what their needs are. Well-developed and documented global technology standards. Few other common traits of companies that are deploying and doing really well. Those that have defined their internal processes, so they've learned from them. They've evaluated multiple systems. They've piloted the technology or created a proof of concept, and then deployed the technology. With technology comes many features and many new functions, and sometimes you'll have people in an organization that want a new gadget for its features and functionality, but companies that deploy standards and have found a way to do this really well, their mentality really is less is more. So they're looking at the majority of their users, that 90 percentile, and what is it that they're using and how are they using it, versus trying to give every feature and function to every single person's wish or whim. So just really meeting the needs of the majority of the clients, and just kind of having a mentality of less is more. Because with a lot of technology and a lot of features and functionality in a room, often it can be confusing to many of the users. Another common trait are organizations that have direct relationships with manufacturers of the system component. So the key elements of a system, and having direct relationships back to those manufacturers. Having on hand a short list of preferred partners within the region. So some might think just sending it out to bid and getting bids from 16 partners and then picking the lowest price might be a good approach. Not what we found. We found companies that are able to deploy quickly and do it well, have their preferred partners that they have relationships with and are experienced. And yeah, they have a process for ensuring that they're getting a fair price, but they're working with kind of this known short list. Another element is thinking about how to support the technology over time with a small staff. Most organizations at a university or in a corporate enterprise have a small staff in their AV/IT teams and facilities teams. So understanding the overall life cycle of the technology, because it goes beyond just selecting technology and getting it deployed in the room. So why technology, and why would we have standards? And what's the biggest challenge that we're trying to overcome? Say the biggest challenge we're working to overcome are variables. So variables, there are a lot of them. So in all this chaos, trying to define standards for an organization can be daunting and difficult to achieve. So I have the belief that those that adopt a standard that's implemented to create ease of use, easy to service, and provide a reliable experience to the end user have the best success, and they work to reduce the number of variables. I understand that not all, every company, one size doesn't fit all companies are different. So think of, as we go through this presentation today, think about this as a smorgasbord. You walk up and you're going to take the elements that you think you can apply and that fit your organization, you're going to leave the rest. Because again, companies are different. So a template for a global standards program has many of these elements, if not all of these elements. And one thing I want to point out is the audiovisual team and the IT team are usually one solid team now. And companies that have been able to deploy standards and do it well have also pulled in facilities or the real estate team as part of the one team concept. Because if you think about it, technology that goes into a meeting room, it's very much affected by how the room gets built out and the furniture that gets placed into a room. So companies that have the most success have embraced and brought in facilities or real estate into their team as well, and they're working as one team in concert. And I've seen some organizations where the AVIT team kind of has an adversarial relationship with the facilities or real estate team. So we don't want that. For the best success, we want to have everybody on one team. And I am going to spend a good amount of time talking about how to build your team. Up front, these are the things that need to be considered. Diagnosing really the challenges people have had with technology in rooms, how it's being used, reporting back, working on budgeting for it and understanding the organization's need for a number of rooms, how they're going to be used, etc. Building the team, building the right partnerships, how do you implement it? Once you're moving forward and doing new builds, how do you go and backfill things? Documenting and keeping a database of what's been done, and then moving through and maintaining it. So I've already mentioned the AV and IT team is one team working well together, and it would be really ideal if facilities and real estate can be put on that team as well. Then you've got these other members as part of the team. So you've got someone on the team that really is managing the overall deployment, timing when equipment comes in so that things are, you're looking at your backlog, you're understanding when a system needs to get built, what's the availability of product, who's involved in actually deploying all of this, etc. Typically, technology that's in a meeting room or classroom is often on the network, or it'll be on a separate network. You need somebody that can speak IT and address any concerns that those involved in IT would have. So the traffic on the network and making sure that there are no concerns there, and that there's somebody managing the terms and ensuring you have the quality of service necessary, etc. Designers, so this would be those that are involved in designing the aesthetics of the room, as well as those designing the technology that goes into the room. And a key member of that can also be a regional consultant or an outside consultant. These are typically people that are not employed by the company, but they're hired for their expertise that they offer in creating a package that can go out and be bid on and built by vendors. They can bring in their expertise from other projects that they've done, and so on. You need a team that can spend time to really test and commission once deployed in pilot or proof of concept, and then as deployments begin to occur, somebody that's really spending time on that last 10% of ensuring that what you've put in really is working as it should. Software programmer, technology is so software-based these days that having someone that can program, having a programmer as a part of your team is really important, because this often is the outcome of their work is what your users will see as they enter a room and learn how to learn and interact with the technology. This is going to be often managed by and created by the person creating and managing the software. And you have to think about who's going to own that software. Is it owned by the vendor that installed it? Is it owned by you, etc.? And this could be a dual role, or it could be an independent role, but somebody that's really managing the relationships, those within the team, those with those key manufacturers, and those with your vendors. And somebody that has excellent communication skills and excellent relationship skills. this person can really make the process go very smoothly if you embrace and add them to your team. Partnering. You're going to have some key technology components in rooms, and if you're able to partner and have a relationship with the manufacturer directly, it will serve you well. Because if you've used an outside consultant or your designer has created a design for particular room types, having another set of eyes from the manufacturer on your designs, I think is just priceless. So they know the best use of their technology and how to use it, and they can offer some best practices in how to deploy it in the design. They can give you guidance on integration partners and vendors in region. They can help you know and be forewarned of maybe end of life of product, the future features and functionality of product. They can tell you if something's backlogged, you know, all the key reasons why you should partner with manufacturers listed here. Another thing that you may not think about, but technology often is integrated with other technology, and could be with the same manufacturer, but often it's with other manufacturers. And manufacturers of equipment often have relationships with other manufacturers. So if you're doing proof of concept and you need to get a technology sent in so that you can vet a room, improve it, many times the manufacturer you're dealing with on some of those key components are going to be able to help you there. So there's just many, 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 many benefits of having a direct relationship and a partner with manufacturers directly. So decide on what your standard room types are going to be. So if you look at a university or a large global enterprise, it may at first glance look like you have a bunch of different room types, but my experience says that most companies tend to scale down to 3 to 5 room types. So decide on standard room types based on all that work that you've done up front. Then build your proof of concept, your pilot rooms. Consider including what type of furniture will be put in. What will the walls be made out of, you know, et cetera. Because having glass walls on 3 sides in rooms where confidential information is going to be displayed may not be the best choice. So all of these things have to be considered. And another element of ensuring that thinking about the furniture and the lighting and how high the ceilings are and building a room out as best you can during your proof of concept is just going to serve you really well over time, because how the room is built will affect how the technology performs in a room. So an example, I recently did a walkthrough of a large company where the display on the wall was a key focal point. And they did not have, when they did their proof of concept and made the choice for that display, they didn't yet have furniture in the room. When they put furniture in the room, those in the front row were able to get the full benefit of the display, but anyone behind the front row in this particular room could only see 2/3 of the content displayed, because they just didn't think about how the room would be set up and used. And so it's just really unfortunate. Another room I recently did a walkthrough on, they chose to put microphones in the room and have them in the ceiling. It was a fairly high ceiling. And then as the room got built out, the air handling duct went right next to the ceiling microphone. So if you were a participant on a conference and you were trying to listen to the participants in that room, it became very difficult when the air handling went on, when the HVAC was engaged. Just you could hear the HVAC, but you could not hear what was happening in the room. So all of these elements should be vetted and considered as much as possible when doing your proof of concept. And you'll have users use the system, you'll be reworking things, and you'll just work it until you feel like you've gotten it as as good as you can get it. And then once that's done, prior to doing all the documentation, you're going to want to get authorization for your decisions and your choices in writing. How you choose to procure equipment and have the documentation sent out for your vendors to provide a price on is very important. So you need to have drawings of where technology will be placed, kind of thinking back to that microphone on the ceiling, thinking about how things will be wired up, etc. So that when vendors are bidding your projects, they're able to bid apples to apples. And again, rather than sending it out to 16 to 20 potential people to bid on it, sending it out to 2 to 3, so you can ensure that do a price check and work to get best pricing. You can also ensure that you're going to get a great implementation as well. So as you begin to implement a large project, it's just critical that you adhere to the standard. And this may seem obvious since we're talking about best practices, but I could tell you I have a client today that has spent time and effort to create standards. And they are deploying projects in the US, APAC, EMEA, etc. They have a vendor in APAC that responded to their package and made some suggestions for changes, and had some really great reasons. Could potentially save money, be easier to deploy, it was available in country, some good reasons for it. But what they weren't thinking about is the overall management and maintenance of a system long term. So if you have standards, really work to adhere to the standards as best you can, because if you're not adhering to the standards, you really don't have a standard. Use that consultant to help you get your packages ready for people to bid on, so that they have drawings as well as the specifications and bill of materials to do. As you go through this process of standards, you're able to really get quickly you're going to see if your budget is aligned with the pricing that's being received back. You're going to be able to look at all of your different room types that you're doing moving forward, but it's also important to look at how do you do the upgrades of the rooms you've had previously, because of the support that needs to be done over time. At this point, you also now have a clear visibility of how long it takes to actually install and commission and test and finish a particular room type, so you can backfill that into your scheduling. Operations. So some companies have a database for this information, and some companies just manage this all from like an Excel spreadsheet. But it's really important to document. Again, we're talking about technology, so most of the technology is going to have some set of firmware, some software in it. And you're going to want to document what version that is. You're going to want to have the drawings of how you put it out to bid, but how was it actually built? So always ask for as-built. Most of this technology that's on the network obviously is going to have an IP address. You're going to want to document the IP address for each device, the serial numbers, warranty information, kind of all of these things. And this will serve you so well when it comes time for if there's a failure and need to support a room. And if you have a partner that's done a particular room type or an install, you want to tie that integrator to the particular room as well, because we've had projects where we're doing a very large building and you have 3 different contractors doing the build outs and doing the different room types. And then if there were a failure, you might be unsure which integrator did which particular room. So really tie that partner to the particular room type and document every possible thing that you can document. Again, just serve you well over time when it comes time to support it. So you've invested time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears in creating these standards, but just know that they're a living document. So they're going to constantly need to be improved. And what I would say is after each deployment, even after you've done particular room types, take time to kind of pause and do a postmortem. What went well, what didn't go well, and what can you do to improve the process? So what can you document that would improve the overall process moving forward? And just taking the time before, then you do the deployment, and then taking the time after to document this has proven to be a really great process. And did you come in budget or not? If you weren't in budget, why? And just know that this is a living document that's going to constantly need to be reviewed and updated. I realize, you realize, there's a lot to be considered when creating best practices or documenting global standards. And I've only, touched on some high points and only a few of these elements. So I'm going to conclude here due to time. And what I would just say is let's conclude and just take a few questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corey, for that amazing presentation. It looks like we actually have a couple questions in the chat box. So before we sign off, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these. The first question we have is, how often should standards be changed?
Every organization is different. And so how often you review and make changes to your standards is going to vary via organization. I would say in best practices, we're seeing changes by an organization semi-annually or annually. Updating too frequently actually creates a situation that becomes very difficult to support what is in the standard.
Great, thank you. The next question that we have is, how often can an organization enforce that every location uses the newly created standard?
For an organization to enforce standards, it's just imperative that their support for the standard and the why of the standard and buy-in across all audiences within an organization, especially from the executive leadership team. You don't have support from the executive leadership team and buy-in throughout the organization, it's going to be very difficult to enforce standards.
Alrighty, on to the next question then. Can you speak to things to consider for supporting the technology that is in the standard?
So some things to think about and to consider in supporting the technology that's decided upon in a standard is, I've mentioned this throughout the webinar, have strong relationships with those key suppliers so that you're aware of updates and changes that they're making to those key components. Another consideration is if a technology is key, it's imperative that you have some spares on hand, because technology is technology. There will be mishaps, things are going to happen, and you're going to want to have spares to be able to swap out the particular piece of technology to get the room up and operating again. So spares would be something to consider.
We're nearing the end of our time together, so I think we'll go ahead and just do one more question. For this last question, it is it possible to have a standard pricing model?
A standard pricing model, I think at some point we're definitely going to see that. And so you can sort of have it today in what I would say in region, so in geographical region. So there are things to consider in those pricing models per region based on landed cost, tariffs, taxes, labor rates, etc. I think you can get a good handle on what a standard for a particular room type is going to cost in the US, in EMEA, APAC, etc. So things can be fairly consistent in region with those considerations.
Okay, so that's all that we have time for today, but I do see that there's a couple of additional questions in the chat box, so I'll make sure that we reach out to you personally to get those answered. Thank you all so much for joining us on this month's webinar, and a huge thanks to Corey from QSC for coming here and presenting on this topic with us. Please visit us at rahisystems.com/resources/webinars to see what we have next in the webinar series. These are hosted on a monthly basis, so we will have something in April towards the end of the month for you all as well. So we look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your time and attending this webinar. If other questions come up, you can reach out to Rahi and we will work to get them answered. Again, thank you and have a great day.